With fresh evidence now surfacing, things have taken a dark turn for Tamor McIntyre, better known by his rap name, Tay-K. At just 24 years old, he has already spent the better part of his adult life behind bars, serving a 55-year sentence for a previous murder conviction. And now, as of April 2025, he is back in a Texas courtroom, this time facing a capital murder charge that could permanently erase any slim hope he had of ever regaining his freedom. On April 1st, Tay-K appeared in a Bexar County courtroom where 4 witnesses testified against him in connection to the 2017 killing of photographer Mark Anthony Saldivar. The incident occurred during a robbery in San Antonio, and prosecutors are confident in the strength of the case they are building. If found guilty, Tay-K faces the grim possibility of life without parole, a sentence that would officially seal his fate, turning the door to freedom into a locked vault. What makes this situation even more startling is that Tay-K reportedly declined a plea deal just last year in February 2024. That deal might have spared him additional decades in prison, but instead, he chose to take his chances in court. Now, with witness testimony stacking up and the prosecution moving with full force, that decision is starting to look like a gamble gone wrong. Originally, this trial was scheduled for February 2025, but was postponed to allow time for key ballistics evidence to be processed. And while all this unfolds, there have been growing concerns about Tay-K's condition behind bars. Observers noted a visible neck injury during his recent court appearance, sparking speculation about his well-being and the conditions he may be facing in prison. The tragic twist in Tay-K's story lies in how rapidly he went from being a young artist with viral fame to someone fighting to survive within the harsh realities of the criminal justice system. His music once echoed the recklessness of his actions, but now the consequences are no longer lyrics, they are life-altering. As the trial continues, Tay-K's name is no longer just tied to controversy or fame, it now stands as a cautionary tale of choices, consequences, and a life caught in a system that rarely offers second chances. Back in 2017, during a chaotic moment that would later add fuel to one of hip-hop's most surreal stories, Tay-K, then just a teenager, was allegedly involved in a violent attempt to rob photographer Mark Anthony Saldivar for his camera gear. But this was no silent theft. When Saldivar resisted and began screaming for help, things spiraled out of control fast. Instead of backing off, Tay-K and his crew reportedly tried to run him down with their vehicle. Saldivar leapt onto the hood in desperation, clinging on as the car sped away. They ended up swerving into a nearby Chick-fil-A parking lot, possibly to shake him off. When the car finally came to a stop, Saldivar got up and stomped the windshield with force, shattering it. What happened next, according to reports, was chilling. Tay-K allegedly leaned out of the window and fired a shot, striking Saldivar and sending him to the pavement. He was left there, dying while the car sped off into the distance. This moment unfolded while Tay-K was already on the run from the law, literally. After cutting off his ankle monitor and fleeing house arrest for an earlier murder charge, Tay-K chose not to lay low. Instead, he went viral. He dropped The Race, a track glorifying his escape, and filmed a music video flaunting his fugitive status, posing beside his own wanted poster. The timing was surreal. On June 30th, 2017, The Race video dropped the exact same day he was arrested in New Jersey by U.S. Marshals. The song hit number 44 on Billboard and went platinum, making Tay-K one of the only artists to reach mainstream fame while actively on the run. But fame came at a price. During his 2019 trial for his first murder case, the killing of Ethan Walker, prosecutors used The Race against him. They painted it as a confession, or at the very least, a disturbing display of disregard for human life. Now, years later, the trial for Saldivar's death has opened another painful chapter. To some, this second trial is necessary, an overdue chance at justice for Saldivar's loved ones. But to others, especially on social media, it feels excessive. Critics online have voiced their frustration, arguing that Tay-K is already serving a virtual life sentence and questioning the timing. One tweet read, "Starting a trial 8 years later is evil. TK is already never getting out." Another added, "Yeah, actions have consequences, but this feels like piling on." Regardless of perspective, Tay-K's saga remains one of the most tragic, controversial, and debated stories in modern rap history, a cautionary tale where music, crime, and consequence collide in full view of the world. Many people are now questioning how much punishment is too much when it comes to Tay-K. He has already been sentenced to 55 years behind bars, with the possibility of parole only after 27.5 years, meaning he would be in his mid-40s before he could even dream of freedom. And now, with another capital murder trial underway, some feel the justice system is simply trying to make an example out of a young man who is already buried under a decades-long sentence. Across social media, fans and observers have voiced frustration. One user argued that adding another life sentence to a man already serving over half a century seems a bit excessive. Others expressed worry that the judge overseeing the case, known for being especially harsh, might push for the maximum sentence possible, even though the death penalty is off the table due to Tay-K's age at the time of the alleged crime. Still, the idea of life without parole looms large, and for many, it feels like a goodbye that has already been said. But to truly understand how Tay-K, once hailed as a rising star in rap, ended up here, you have to look beyond the headlines and into his past, a past filled with instability, trauma, and a system that never really caught him when he fell. Born Tamor McIntyre on June 16, 2000, in Long Beach, California, Tay-K entered a world where street life was not just a neighborhood reality, it was a family legacy. Both of his parents were involved in gangs. His father was in and out of prison, and his mother remained active in the Baby Insane Crips while raising Tay-K and his sister, Kayla. By the time he was just 2 years old, his father was serving a 7-year sentence, and the absence of a stable male role model left a huge void. Things worsened when his mother, overwhelmed by circumstances, lost custody. Tay-K and his sister were placed into foster care, where they bounced between homes, schools, and families. That instability left deep emotional wounds. As his sister later shared, "Near all our life, we never stayed with our parents. We kind of stayed in different foster homes." That constant displacement meant adapting to ever-changing rules and facing rejection from families who never kept them long. After a brief move to Las Vegas, where his mother tried to leave gang life behind, the family relocated to Texas when Tay-K's father was released from prison. Sadly, the reunion brought more pain. Reports suggest his father became abusive, and Tay-K often stayed with friends to avoid going home. By 2014, as a freshman in high school, Tay-K found some light in music. Alongside friends, he formed the group Daytona Boys, dropped tracks on SoundCloud, and played local shows. Music could have been his way out. But trouble kept knocking. A resurfaced tweet shows Tay-K being expelled for bringing marijuana to school. School was no longer an option, and home was no safe haven. It is a painful reflection of a young life shaped by chaos long before crime. Now, as he sits in court facing yet another potential life sentence, the question is not just about justice. It is about how a child, once failed by every safety net, ended up at the center of one of hip-hop's darkest cautionary tales. By the time Tay-K was just 15, he had already slipped through nearly every crack the system could offer. No stable home, no structured school life. He was essentially living off the kindness of friends, drifting from couch to couch. With no anchor and no guidance, it was only a matter of time before crime replaced survival as his everyday reality. His first real exposure to deadly violence came on New Year's Day in 2016. Tay-K was in the car when his friend Santana Sage fatally shot college student Sarah Muchlegner during a road altercation. Tay-K faced no charges, but that moment may have left a deeper impression than anyone realized. To witness murder at close range, yet walk away untouched by the law, can send a dangerous message to a young mind already hardened by neglect. It can blur the line between consequence and invincibility. Only 6 months later, things took a far darker turn. In July 2016, 16-year-old Tay-K and 6 others planned a home invasion, targeting Zachary Belote, a local who was rumored to be a drug dealer. But inside the home was also Ethan Walker, Zachary's roommate. The robbery spiraled into tragedy when one of Tay-K's accomplices, Letharian Merritt, shot and killed Walker. Another, Sean Robinson, injured Belote. Though Tay-K never pulled the trigger, Texas law does not split hairs in cases like these. Under the law of parties, anyone who plays a role in a violent felony that leads to death can be charged with murder. Tay-K, as a participant in the planned robbery, was treated no differently than the shooter. Initially, Tay-K was placed in juvenile custody. But after some time, he was released under house arrest to stay with his sister, Kayla. What came next would define his life forever. After 8 months, he cut off his ankle monitor and vanished, taunting authorities online, posting that he had beat the case. While on the run, he was allegedly involved in another fatal incident, the shooting of photographer Mark Saldivar in San Antonio, and also created the infamous Track the Race, where he rapped about being on the run. He even posed next to his own wanted poster in the video, which dropped the exact same day U.S. Marshals captured him in New Jersey, June 30th, 2017. The race went viral, peaking at number 44 on the Billboard Hot 100 and earning platinum status. But what might have looked like clever self-marketing to fans became ammunition for prosecutors. When Tay-K went to trial in 2019 for the Ethan Walker case, the prosecution used the race as evidence, claiming it showed his coldness toward the crime. He was sentenced to 55 years in prison. But the controversy surrounding Tay-K's case did not end with the gavel hitting the bench. In fact, many argue the most unsettling part of the entire situation began after the verdict was read. One of the loudest and most emotional talking points has been the glaring disparity in sentencing between Tay-K and some of his co-defendants, especially a white female co-conspirator who reportedly played a key role in planning the robbery that led to Ethan Walker's death. This young woman, just like Tay-K, was 16 years old at the time of the crime. But while Tay-K received a 55-year prison sentence under Texas party liability law, she was sentenced to probation, just 10 months. Not prison, not even juvenile detention. Probation. To many, this decision highlighted something deeper than legal technicalities. It pointed straight to race and systemic bias. The sentencing gap between Tay-K and his white co-defendant continues to stir outrage because it symbolizes something bigger, a legal system that too often treats black and white youth very differently for the same crimes. In Tay-K's case, many feel the sentence was not only about law, it was also about legacy, bias, and the society that failed him long before the courtroom ever did. In the end, Tay-K's story is not just about a teenager who made devastating choices. It is also about a broken system, a cycle of pain, and a question that haunts every courtroom like his: how do we punish a child for growing up in chaos? Now, as Tay-K stands on the edge of a second murder trial, the light at the end of the tunnel grows dimmer with each passing day. Already 6 years into a 55-year sentence, any additional conviction, especially one that leads to life without parole, would all but seal his fate. The phrase "goodbye forever" is no longer a figure of speech. For a once promising rapper whose voice briefly electrified the culture, it now feels like a cruel prophecy. What makes Tay-K's story so painful is not just the crimes or the punishment. It is the haunting question of what could have been. Despite releasing only a few songs before his arrest, Tay-K's raw energy and instinctive grasp of what moved listeners allowed the race to soar. It went platinum. Heavyweights like 21 Savage and Tyga jumped on remixes. And even now, long after the bars slammed shut behind him, Tay-K pulls in nearly 3 million monthly listeners on Spotify. The music world has not forgotten him. Some fans, and even people close to him, still wrestle with the loss of that talent. His uncle once said, he could have been a leader in the new wave of hip-hop. He was ahead of the curve, right there with the SoundCloud legends like XXXTentacion and Playboi Carti. If life had taken a different course, he might be leading the pack today, above artists like NBA YoungBoy or Lil Durk. He described Tay-K as sharp, articulate, and strangely tactical for someone so young, someone who, had he been nurtured instead of neglected, could have built an empire rather than burn bridges. This sentiment echoes across online forums, where debate rages over whether Tay-K is a tragic waste of genius or a dangerous criminal beyond redemption. On Reddit, one user voiced a conflicted truth. Obviously, yay, he's a murderer, but we're just saying, if he wasn't, he'd be huge. Another flatly called him a demon and said he should rot behind bars. These opposing views capture the heart of the moral dilemma. Can talent ever offset the weight of real-world harm? Tay-K's life raises deep questions. How much does a traumatic childhood account for adult decisions? Can a teenager raised in chaos be held to the same standard of accountability as someone who grew up with structure and support? And at what age do we stop believing in second chances? Even behind bars, Tay-K's story continues to unfold in unsettling ways. In one online post, he compared his prison cell to a hamster cage, offering a stark glimpse into the emotional wear of long-term incarceration on a young mind. At the same time, there have been troubling allegations that he tried to create a prison gang called the Rugrats, suggesting that parts of the old street mentality still linger, even in confinement. As the calendar turns to 2025 and his second murder trial proceeds, the consequences loom heavy, not just for Tay-K, but for the families of the victims. Ethan Walker's father said it best after the first conviction. To him, the race felt like Tay-K was dancing on Ethan's grave. No lyric, no beat, no viral video can ever bring back the lives that were lost. Tay-K's saga is many things: a cautionary tale about the seduction of violence, an indictment of how society fails its most vulnerable kids, and a portrait of what happens when talent is devoured by tragedy. At just 24 years old, he is staring down a life that may never see freedom again. And so, goodbye forever is not just a phrase. It is a farewell to the career that once sparked fire, a farewell to a future filled with promise, and most heartbreakingly, a farewell to the version of himself that might have been, if only someone had reached him before the streets did.